Up next, we have Aliyan Boodhwani, a 16-year-old high school student from Ottawa. He's passionate about climate change, emerging technologies, and impactful projects like writing research papers on carbon capture. Join me in welcoming Aliyan to the stage.
I want you to take a second and think about someone who you look up to and admire. Someone you'd give anything to meet, even for just an hour. If you're into climate activism, maybe it's someone like Greta Thunberg. Or if you're an aspiring YouTuber, maybe it's Mr. Beast. The reason we admire these people is for their incredible life experiences. So imagine if you had the opportunity to learn from one of these people and gain all their knowledge and wisdom. Someone I'd love to meet is Louis Agassiz. He was an 18th century natural historian, but he was so much more than that. This guy built an entire house on a glacier and secluded himself in Brazil just to study fish. In other words, he had incredible life experiences, he traveled a ton, and he had accumulated a lot of knowledge and wisdom. So imagine you had the opportunity to meet Agassiz. You walk into his office, he's not there, and all you can find on the desk is a fish, with a note that reads, "Look at the fish. I'll be back later. Agassiz." Now, you're a little confused, and with good reason, but you decide to give it a shot. You pick up the fish and examine its scales and its eyes, feel its fins and its tail. And you report what you find to Agassiz. But all he does is shake his head and say, "Look again," and then leaves the room. Now, at this point, you're a little frustrated, and you're almost ready to give up. But determined not to disappoint Agassiz, you pick up a dissection kit and decide to give it another shot. This time, you use the dissection kit to open up the fish, examine its organs and the arrangement of its body. And what you find is fascinating. The fish's organs are the same on both sides of its body, but mirrored. And this is something that applies not only to fish, but to many animals and humans as well. When you report this excitedly to Agassiz, he smiles, nods his head, and says, "You have now seen the fish." The story of Agassiz and the fish are an excellent allegory for the nature of seeking knowledge. Humans, since the beginning of their existence, have sought to understand the world around them. And in doing so, they seek to uncover the layers of existence. What I mean by layers of existence are the more general forms of knowledge. The first layer might be found by looking at the fish, its eyes and its scales. And the next might be found by feeling the fish, its fins and its tail. But finding deeper and deeper layers of knowledge requires more questioning and different tools, like the dissection kit. This is what Agassiz encouraged his students to do. Use new tools to open up the fish and examine it at the deepest possible level. And in doing so, they uncovered more about the world and our own existence. And seeking these deeper layers comes down to seeking more and more knowledge. The pursuit of knowledge has always been something integral to my life. This is me presenting at my grade 2 science fair. I was always a super curious kid, and I loved to learn as much as I could about the world around me. And I was always taught in school that the best way to learn about the world was through science and experimentation. But as I grew up, I began to learn about methods of seeking knowledge that I couldn't find anywhere in my textbooks. And I began to ask an important question. Is science the only way to seek knowledge? Our most famous knowledge seekers are scientists like Albert Einstein or Marie Curie. They use the most common way to seek knowledge, the scientific method. They ask a question and use what we already know to come up with a hypothesis, a guess as to whether the question is true or false. Then they design an experiment to test this question and figure out what is actually true. And depending on the strength of their experiment and repeated results, that result gets inducted into our collective knowledge. The scientific method is a tool we use to understand the world around us, and it's based on observation and experimentation. But is it the only tool? Let me tell you a story. In 9th century Baghdad, scholars from all over the world would gather in the House of Wisdom, or Beit al-Hikmah, and there they would engage in what had become a well-known tradition, the debate. In these debates, scholars would discuss their ideas late into the night, debating everything from natural history and law to medicine and theology. Their debates included logical arguments with evidence, using their intellects, known there as aql, not unlike the scientific method. But there were times when Uckle only took them so far. In addition to their intellectual questions, they asked questions that were mystical in nature, like what does it mean to be in the presence of God? And they found that their methods of observation and experiment could not answer these questions. In some communities, especially those focused on the scientific method, these questions were pushed to the side. In these communities, there existed a boundary of knowledge, a wall between them and a deeper layer of existence that experimentation could not penetrate, the mystical layer. Going back to the fish, there was a limit to how much knowledge could be gained only by looking at the eyes and scales of the fish. But across time, scholars who were also mystics, such as those in the House of Wisdom, sought to understand these questions from two angles, intellectual and spiritual. They took time to meditate and look within themselves to gain answers to these mystical questions that were deeper and more personal to them. It was like they had opened up a new tool, the dissection kit, which allowed them to examine the fish and our world at a much deeper level. But as a result of the rise of science, we lost the ability to use some of these methods. It was as though we had lost the dissection kit. And one reason for this was this misconception that mystical methods are only available to mystics. Professor Omid Safi of Duke University calls mystics children of the moment. Meditation and spiritual search, therefore, are simply methods we use to remain grounded in the present and understand what is directly in front of us and examine those things at the deepest possible level in order to uncover as much as we can about our world. That's something that can be done by anyone. Today, we may believe that there has been a divide between the intellectual tools like the scientific method and mystical tools such as meditation. And in some parts of history, there has been. But as we've seen, in order to uncover the deepest layers of existence, we need a revival of all methods of seeking knowledge. We need to use intellectual and spiritual tools in conjunction with each other to understand as much as we can about our world and answer questions that aren't limited just to experimentation, like what is the nature of consciousness and what is our purpose on this earth as humans. I can imagine a future where after long hours of staring at equations, scientists turn to mystical methods of meditation to generalize what they have learned and clear their minds. And a world in which mystics connect with a wide network of scientists to understand how meditation affects the brain on a biochemical level. And a world in which people, just like you and I, use these intellectual and spiritual methods of seeking knowledge in conjunction with each other to understand as much as we can about the universe and our place in it. The pursuit of knowledge is something that excites and stimulates anyone who engages in it. The combination of these knowledge-seeking tools can only serve to add to that excitement. As Louis Agassiz of fish observing fame put it, I will frankly tell you that my experience in prolonged scientific investigations convinces me that a belief in God, a God who is behind and within the chaos of the vanishing points of human knowledge, adds a wonderful stimulus to the man who attempts to penetrate into the regions of the unknown. Thank you.